Welcome to Infidelity Diaries. Explore the secrets and stories of infidelity with us. On the first day of our long awaited vacation, I suddenly realized how little time I leave for myself. Sarah, my best friend, and I arrived in a small coastal town, a place where time seemed to have stopped, and the wind, filling my lungs with the scent of the sea, carried with it the promise of something new. We checked into a cozy hotel right by the beach, and it felt strange to see myself in the mirror, surrounded by these bright walls, which seemed to reflect the freedom I had lost long ago. In the past few months, I had barely felt any joy. Logan and I seemed to have lost our way in the maze of daily routines and habits. Everything around us became too proper and too predictable, and I lost the sense of who I truly was. Was I still the same Rachel who once dreamed of great adventures and romantic love stories? Or had I become just a part of the household machine, working through the same old script day after day? Sarah immediately suggested we relax. We threw our bags in the room and headed to the beach. Her lightheartedness and carefreeness were exactly what I needed at that moment. She laughed, making fun of the local landmarks and the screaming seagulls, who seemed to be playing their own game with us. I smiled, but the feeling of emptiness didn't leave me, and that probably meant too much already. Lying back on the lounge chair, Sarah handed me a glass with a cold drink and said, "Just enjoy the moment, Rachel. Forget everything for this week." I nodded, but deep down, I knew I couldn't just switch off my thoughts like a light. Somewhere inside, there was a nagging worry, like a small pebble in a shoe that makes it hard to walk. I couldn't forget Logan, his tired eyes, that heavy sigh when he came home from work, not expecting anything new from the evening. Sarah was right. I deserved this vacation, deserved to break away from the routine. But I couldn't stop asking myself, what went wrong? When did I stop feeling alive? Why had my life with Logan, once full of laughter and passion, turned into a monotonous repetition of the same actions? I wanted to tell Sarah all these doubts, but something held me back. Maybe it was the fear that saying it out loud would make the emptiness even more real. While Sarah basked in the sun, I decided to walk along the shore. The sand gave way softly under my feet. The water touched my ankles, and for a moment, I felt lighter. Maybe that's all I needed, to just feel this moment, embrace it. I closed my eyes and tried to let go of my thoughts, like feathers carried away by the wind. But even in this silence and solitude, that restless voice inside me kept buzzing, reminding me that I wasn't happy anymore. I remembered how Logan once told me that we were a team, but now I felt like I was on a boat with no oar, and the water beneath me had become too calm, too stagnant. We had lost our way, and I didn't know if we could find it again. I glanced back at Sarah. She sat there with her eyes closed, soaking up the sun, so confident that the world belonged to her. She wasn't afraid to live, wasn't afraid to make mistakes. I longed to feel that kind of lightness again, that kind of confidence. I even felt a twinge of envy at her ability to enjoy the moment, to be here and now, while I was trapped by my own thoughts and fears. That evening, as we returned to the hotel, Sarah asked what was wrong with me. I shrugged and smiled, saying, "Just trying to relax." Of course, she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. In her eyes, I saw the same concern I had known for years. Sarah had always understood me better than anyone else, but now I wanted to hide my vulnerability from her, not to seem weak. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows move from the window curtains. This whole setting seemed to be made to make one feel alive. The sound of the sea outside the window, the salty smell in the air, the moonlight spilling onto the floor. And yet, something inside me remained still, as if I had become part of the decor, beautiful but devoid of depth. I turned onto my side, closing my eyes, and tried to picture Logan. His face blurred before me, and that scared me more than anything. How can you lose the image of the one you love? Maybe it was because I had been waiting for something more for too long, and now that something more hadn't arrived, I had forgotten how to be content with what I had. Tomorrow is a new day, and maybe it will bring me something different, something real. Or at least I hope so. After all, maybe this vacation is my chance to remember who I am, or at least to find the answer to the question, what do I truly want from this life? With these thoughts, I closed my eyes, letting the sound of the sea lull me to sleep. But of course, there was no peace. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this vacation would become something more than just a week by the sea. But what exactly awaited me, I couldn't yet imagine. On the second day of our vacation, we headed to the beach. The sun was high, and the sea beckoned with its freshness. Sarah immediately stretched out on the lounge chair, basking in the sun's rays, while I, feeling a slight unease, decided to do something I had been putting off for a long time. "Sarah, I'm going to try swimming," I said, trying to hide my nervousness. "Seriously?" "You've never liked the water." She looked at me in surprise, then smiled. "Well, good luck. And don't forget, if anything happens, the lifeguard here is just gorgeous." She winked, and I rolled my eyes. Despite her words, I really wanted to experience something new, to step out of my comfort zone. I carefully stepped into the water, feeling the cool waves gently embrace my legs. Step by step, I went further, feeling the cold water reach my waist. With each step, a wave of courage washed over me, but so did a bit of fear. The water around me grew deeper, and soon I couldn't feel the bottom beneath my feet. Suddenly, the waves grew stronger, and panic flashed in my mind. "It's okay," I whispered to myself, but anxiety overwhelmed me, and I felt like I was losing control of my body. The water started pulling me under, and each breath became harder. The world around me blurred. My heart raced faster, and I no longer understood what was happening. In that moment, I felt strong arms wrap around me, lifting me out of the water. I coughed, trying to catch my breath. Standing before me was a tall, muscular man in a lifeguard uniform. "Are you okay?" His voice was steady and calm. I looked up at him, still not fully grasping what had happened. Yes, thank you," I muttered, feeling my face flush. "You're not much of a swimmer, are you?" The lifeguard smiled, his eyes gleaming in the sunlight. "I'm Adam. Glad I could help." "Rachel," I managed to say, still trying to collect myself. "Thank you, Adam. I I guess I overestimated my abilities." "It happens." He smiled and gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. "But next time, don't take the risk alone. The water here can be tricky." I nodded, and Adam helped me stand up. My legs were still shaky, but his confidence was contagious. As we walked back to the shore, Sarah jumped up from her lounge chair, her eyes wide with fear. "Oh my God, Rachel! Have you lost your mind?" She rushed toward me, hugging me and looking me over from head to toe. "What happened?" "I'm fine, Sarah, really." I smiled at her, though my hands were still trembling. "I just overestimated myself a little." "Thank you so much." Sarah turned to Adam, her voice filled with gratitude and a hint of excitement. "If it weren't for you." "It's all good. Glad I could help." He smiled again, and there was something reassuring in that smile. "Rachel, I hope you'll be more careful next time." "Definitely," I replied, feeling a strange sensation wash over me. His gaze, that moment, it all left a mark on me, one that was hard to ignore. When Adam left, Sarah sighed, shaking her head and sitting back down on her lounge chair. "You scared me half to death," she said, looking at me. "Why did you even go into the water?" "I just wanted to try something new," I replied, avoiding her gaze. "It might sound silly, but I needed to feel alive." Sarah softened a little and nodded understandingly. "Okay, just don't do that again, all right?" My heart almost stopped. She smiled and handed me a bottle of water. "Here, you need to rest." I sat down next to her, feeling my body start to relax. But my mind kept replaying thoughts of Adam, his confidence, his kindness. It was all so different from what I was used to seeing every day. Something about that brief moment, about being saved, made me feel different. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, someone truly saw me. Not just a woman, a wife, part of the routine. That feeling was frightening, but also thrilling in some strange way. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, looking at me. "Nothing," I smiled. "Just trying to relax, like you said." But of course, it was a lie. The next day, I saw Adam again on the beach. He was there, in his familiar lifeguard uniform, keeping an eye on the beachgoers. When he noticed me, his face lit up with a smile, and I felt my heart skip a beat before racing faster. "Hey, Rachel! Glad to see you back," he greeted, walking closer. "Hey, Adam," I smiled, feeling a childish excitement stirring inside me. "This time, I'll stay far away from the water." He laughed, and suddenly, his laughter filled me with a sense of lightness, like waves brushing gently against the shore. "That's a wise choice," he agreed, nodding. "Say, how do you feel about an evening walk on the beach? I can show you some beautiful spots." My first reaction was instinctive, to refuse. After all, this wasn't right. Not something a married woman should do. But something inside me, something warm and urgent, like a cry for freedom, made me answer, "Why not? I'd love to." Adam smiled, and his eyes lit up. I felt something spark within me, too. We agreed to meet in the evening, and for the rest of the day, I was on edge, oscillating between excitement and doubt. As the sun began to set, I returned to the beach. Adam was waiting for me by the lifeguard tower, and his silhouette against the setting sun looked confident and calm. He waved at me, and I approached, trying not to let my nervousness show. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, extending his hand to help me down to the sand. "I think so," I replied, taking his hand. It was warm and strong, and I suddenly realized how long it had been since I felt such support. We wandered along the shore, talking about life. Adam told me how he became a lifeguard, about his dreams, and how much he loved being by the sea. I listened, and his words felt so real, so simple. He lived the way he wanted to, and that filled me with a mix of envy and admiration. "And you?" he asked as we stopped by the water, watching the waves crash against the shore. "What do you want, Rachel?" That question caught me off guard. I didn't know how to answer. After all, my desires had been buried deep inside, hidden beneath layers of obligations, routine, and doubts. I I don't know," I admitted honestly, looking at the horizon. "Sometimes it feels like I've lost touch with myself, like what I want doesn't matter anymore." Adam looked at me intently, then gently took my hand. "Maybe you just need to give yourself a little freedom," he said softly. I turned to him, and in that moment, something shifted. The sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon, and all around us was just the sea, the sand, and the soft sound of the waves. Adam stepped closer, his eyes full of warmth and some kind of understanding I couldn't quite grasp. Before I realized what was happening, he touched my lips with his. At first, I pulled away, instinctively, like a barrier rising between us. But then something inside me broke, and I allowed myself to embrace the moment. When we pulled apart, I felt my entire body trembling, not with fear, but with the realization that this moment was real. Adam looked at me and smiled, as if nothing had happened, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Don't be afraid of your desires, Rachel," he said quietly. "Sometimes they show you who you really are." I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded, feeling the world around me begin to shift. Everything that had been important before this moment suddenly seemed blurred and uncertain. I knew one thing. This kiss had opened something new inside me, something I still had to understand. We continued our walk, but now there were no words between us. Just the evening air, the sand beneath our feet, and the feeling that the world had changed a little. I returned to the hotel, and my heart seemed to pound heavily in my chest. My thoughts were a tangled mess, and emotions crashed over me like waves, leaving behind confusion and pain. I love Logan. Or at least, I've always believed I did. But then, what's happening? That kiss with Adam was like a flash of light in the darkness. It revealed something I hadn't seen in so long. Something important. Something real. Sarah, as usual, was sitting on her bed with her phone in hand, scrolling through photos from the trip. When I walked in, she looked up at me, smiled, and asked, "How was the walk? Did you find anything interesting?" I lingered in the doorway, trying to hide my confusion, then forced myself to smile. "Yeah, a little. It was beautiful. The sun, the sea." I trailed off, unsure how to describe everything that had happened. "Just got some fresh air." "Great," Sarah nodded, returning to her phone. "We need to relax while we can. Otherwise, why did we come here at all?" I smiled, but I couldn't shake the heaviness inside. All I wanted was to return to my usual state of calm, to forget what had happened. But instead, every thought returned to Adam. His hands, his voice, the way he looked at me so tenderly, as if he knew me better than I knew myself. The next morning, I tried to distract myself. Sarah and I went on a tour of the old town, taking pictures of the ancient streets, buying souvenirs at the local market. Sarah laughed, taking selfies in front of the bright walls and colorful signs. I tried to match her mood, but inside it was hard. It was as if I were on the outside, just a spectator, not a participant. "You don't look happy, Rachel," Sarah said, looking at me. "Did something happen?" "No, everything's fine," I lied, trying to smile. "Just a bit tired." "Well, if you need to rest, we can head back to the hotel," she suggested, but I shook my head. "No, let's keep going. I need to stay busy." Sarah frowned but didn't argue. I could feel her concern, her desire to help, but how could I explain that all I was troubled by was the kiss with someone who wasn't my husband? That this kiss made me question something I had long lost within myself? No, I couldn't say that. That evening, we were back at the beach. Sarah stayed by the water, while I, wanting to be alone, walked along the shore. I thought about Logan, about his calm face, how he always tried so hard for us, about his care and love, which were as solid as the foundation of a house. But is stability everything needed for happiness? Is that enough to feel alive? I felt my heart tighten when I saw a figure in the distance. It was Adam. He was standing there, looking out at the sea, and in that moment, I realized I couldn't just forget him. Something about this man drew me in, made me feel different, free, real. As I walked closer, Adam noticed me and smiled. "Hi, Rachel," he said, his voice so soft and enveloping that a shiver ran through my body. "Hi," I replied, unsure of how else to start this conversation. We stood side by side, and the silence between us was filled with some deeper meaning. I looked at the horizon, at the lines of the waves, and all I could feel was this strange yet powerful attraction to a man I had known for only a few days. "Are you thinking about yesterday?" he asked quietly, and I nodded, unsure of how to answer in words. "That was unexpected," I finally said. "I don't know what to do with it." Adam looked at me, and there was something in his eyes that made me feel weak and vulnerable. "Maybe you don't need to do anything," he replied. "Just be yourself, Rachel. Let yourself be happy, even if it scares you." His words were so simple, yet they held a truth I was afraid to accept. I didn't know what to do. But one thing I knew for sure: this kiss and this man had already changed me, and there was no turning back. We started seeing each other in secret. It happened naturally, as if it was meant to be, and neither Adam nor I spoke about it aloud. Every one of our dates began with a walk along the beach, where the wind played with my hair, and the sand shifted gently under our feet. We held hands, sharing thoughts that once seemed too personal to share with anyone else. Evenings turned into nights as we sat on the shore, gazing at the stars. Adam told me about his childhood, his dreams and fears, about how, despite his apparent ease and confidence, he sometimes felt lonely too. I listened to him, and with every word, my walls of caution crumbled. I, too, began to share what was deep inside me, my doubts, how I had lost myself in routine and obligations, how I had stopped feeling anything real. "I like being with you," he said one night, looking at me with a sincerity that was both terrifying and so necessary. "You don't have to hide your pain. I see the real you, and that matters to me." Those words struck straight into my heart. They became, in a way, my justification, a justification for what I was doing. I knew I was betraying Logan, that I had no right to these feelings, but in the moments I spent with Adam, it stopped mattering. I felt free, the kind of freedom I had long forgotten. And that freedom was intoxicating. Adam showed me hidden corners of the coastline where no one ventured, small coves where we could listen to the whisper of the waves and forget about everything else. We found places where we could be alone, hidden from prying eyes. There, under the stars, I allowed myself to be vulnerable, to feel. One night, we climbed a small cliff with a view of the entire shore. Adam wrapped his arms around me, and I felt his breath on my neck. It was both frightening and thrilling, like standing on the edge of a precipice, and at the same time, wanting to leap into the unknown. "Rachel, you don't have to do anything you don't want to," he whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "But I do want to," I said, looking into his eyes. "I want to be here. I want to be with you." His arms tightened around me, and I closed my eyes, listening to the waves crashing below. It all felt so wrong, yet so real at the same time. I felt alive, truly alive, and that was something I had been missing for so long. Every meeting with Adam was like an escape from responsibilities, from routine, from everything I was supposed to do and feel. With him, I was someone else, someone I believed I once was, and someone I hadn't been able to be for so long. These moments became my salvation, even if they were built on deception. "Have you ever thought about what you'll do next?" he asked me once, as we sat on the rocks, watching the moon. I sighed and shook my head. I don't know what's next. I'm just living in the moment. It's too scary to think about what comes after." "I understand," he said quietly, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. "But remember, I'll always be here if you need me." I smiled, feeling my throat tighten with emotion. I knew that sooner or later I would have to return to reality. But for now, this world we had created together was my refuge, my salvation. Sarah started to notice the changes. She squinted at me when I was about to leave again in the evening, and her eyes were filled with suspicion. I knew my behavior had become more nervous and distracted, and it couldn't have escaped her attention. "You're leaving again?" she asked one evening, as I was putting on my jacket in front of the mirror. "You've been going out alone in the evenings quite a lot, Rachel." I froze for a moment, trying not to give myself away. Turning to her, I forced myself to smile as casually as possible. "Yeah, I just want some time alone with my thoughts," I replied, avoiding her gaze. "You know how beautiful it is here in the evenings." Sarah frowned, not taking her eyes off me. "Are you sure everything's okay? You've been different these past few days. Nervous? Is something going on?" Her voice was filled with concern, but I couldn't afford to tell her the truth. I turned away, pretending to fix my hair. "No, everything's fine," I said. "I've just been a bit overwhelmed, that's all. The vacation was supposed to help, but I guess I'm just overthinking things." Sarah sighed but didn't press further. I knew she sensed that something was wrong, but perhaps she didn't want to push and ask uncomfortable questions. That gave me the opportunity to leave, to dive back into that world where it was just me and Adam. When I met Adam that evening, I felt a heaviness in my chest. We found our usual secluded spot on the shore, where we could be alone, and he looked at me as if he could sense my unease. Is everything all right? He asked, sitting next to me and touching my hand. I don't know, I admitted honestly, staring out at the sea. Sarah has started to suspect something. I don't know how much longer I can keep hiding this. Adam nodded, his face becoming serious. You don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with, Rachel. If you want to stop. I shook my head, cutting him off. No, that's not it. I'm just scared. Scared that I won't be able to go back to my old life. That this affair has changed me too much. He stayed silent, listening to me, and I felt tears start to well up in my eyes. I quickly wiped them away, not wanting to show weakness. I know this is temporary, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. But I can't stop. When I'm with you, I feel alive, and at home. At home, I just exist. Adam hugged me, and I leaned into his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body. In his arms, I felt protected, but at the same time, I knew it was an illusion. Sooner or later, I'd have to return to reality, return to Logan, to the life I had worked so hard to build. But how could I now pretend that nothing had happened? I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to this moment a little longer, trying to forget the fears and doubts. But deep down, I knew the end of this romantic escape was approaching, and I would have to face the consequences of my actions. The next day, I sat on the hotel terrace, watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon. With each passing moment, I became more aware that my connection with Adam had grown into something more than just a fleeting attraction. His presence had filled my life with colors I hadn't felt in a long time, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts. Logan's voice echoed in my mind, his laughter, our shared memories. I still had deep feelings for him, and they hadn't disappeared. But at the same time, I was drawn to Adam, to his sense of freedom, to his ability to make me feel alive. Rachel, Sarah's voice brought me back to reality. I opened my eyes to see her concerned face. Are you sure you're okay? You've been quiet for a while. I started, but the words caught in my throat. What could I possibly tell her? That I was torn between two men, between two worlds, one that had become a prison for me, and the other a refuge. I'm just trying to figure things out, Sarah. It's a bit more complicated than it seems. She sat down next to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm here if you need to talk. You know that, right? I nodded, feeling a swirl of emotions inside me. I needed to make a decision, to understand how I was going to live from here on out. But for now, I could only cling to these moments with Adam, to this illusion of freedom that was becoming more and more real for me. I knew I couldn't live in lies any longer, but I didn't know what to do. On one hand, there was my life with Logan, stable, familiar, full of memories and love. On the other hand, there was Adam, the man who had made me feel alive again. I was torn between these two worlds, and neither seemed like the right choice. But I had to make one, and soon. On the 6th day of vacation, everything changed. Seeing my strange behavior and constant evening disappearances, Sarah began to suspect something was wrong. She had always been perceptive, and I knew I couldn't keep my secret hidden for much longer. That evening, I headed to the beach again, hoping to meet Adam and, at least for a while, lose myself in his embrace. But something felt off. An uneasy feeling lingered, as if someone was watching me. Sarah decided to follow me. She couldn't tolerate my erratic and nervous behavior anymore, which was becoming more obvious with each passing day. On the dark silhouette of the night beach, her eyes scanned for me. At first, she just wanted to make sure I was okay. But when she saw Adam and me, her world seemed to turn upside down. I approached the lifeguard tower, where Adam was already waiting. His figure was illuminated by the faint light of the moon, and I felt a surge of excitement wash over me once again. We silently moved toward each other, and I felt his hands on my waist. His touch was so familiar, so needed. I pressed against him, and in the next moment, our lips met in a passionate kiss. At that moment, the world disappeared, leaving just the two of us. We forgot everything: reality, problems, the possibility that someone might see us. It was at that moment that Sarah emerged from behind the dunes. She froze, as if she had seen something she couldn't comprehend or accept. Shock and disbelief were written in her eyes as she watched us. It was the moment when all my lies crumbled. I felt time slow down, and when I looked up, I saw her. Our eyes met, and in hers, I saw pain and disappointment. Rachel! Sarah's voice cut through the silence of the night. It was filled with surprise and bitterness. I pulled away from Adam as if I had been struck. My heart raced, and I felt fear rising inside me. Everything I had dreaded was now right in front of me: exposure, judgment, the destruction of the life I knew. Adam tried to say something, but Sarah was already walking toward us, her face hard and determined. As she got closer, I saw the tears in her eyes. She stopped in front of me, her hands trembling. "What's going on, Rachel?" Her voice was quiet, but it held so much emotion that it pierced me to the core. "Are you cheating on Logan?" "With him? With this man?" I tried to find the words, but they wouldn't come. How could I explain something that was impossible to justify? How could I defend my betrayal? I dot. I started, but the words stuck in my throat. I looked at Sarah, realizing there was no point in lying anymore. Everything was out in the open. I sighed, feeling tears begin to roll down my cheeks. "Yes, Sarah, I'm cheating on Logan." Her eyes widened, and a sea of emotions crossed her face: pain, anger, disappointment. She turned away, as if she couldn't bear to look at me anymore, then turned back, her eyes flashing. "How could you?" "Logan loves you. He trusts you. I thought you were different, Rachel." Her voice trembled, and each word seemed to wound me. I wanted to say something, to explain, but all I could do was shake my head. I couldn't justify myself. Everything I had done was wrong, and I knew it. But I also knew that my feelings for Adam were real. They weren't just a fling. They were something more, something I couldn't ignore, even knowing how destructive it was. I don't know what to say," I whispered, feeling my legs give way beneath me. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened." Sarah frowned, her gaze cold and heavy. "Happened," she scoffed. "This didn't just happen, Rachel. This was your choice. You chose this. You chose him." Her words hit me hard, forcing me to realize the full weight of what I had done. Yes, it was my choice. I chose Adam. I chose this path, despite all the risks and consequences. Sarah sighed, her face softening. She stepped closer to me, and to my surprise, hugged me. "Rachel, I understand that you're struggling. I can see you're confused, but you have to understand. You can't go on like this. You need to talk to Logan. You need to be honest with him. This can't stay hidden." I hugged her back, feeling my tears flow even more freely. There was truth in her words that I was afraid to face. I knew I had to tell Logan, had to confess everything, but the thought of it was unbearable. How could I destroy his world? How could I admit to betraying his trust? "I'm scared, Sarah," I whispered. "I'm scared of losing him. I'm scared of losing everything." She pulled back and looked me in the eye. "I know, but you're already losing him, Rachel. With every day, every lie, every secret night, you have to make a choice, and it has to be the right one." Her words echoed in my mind, even after she left, leaving me alone with Adam. He came over, placing a hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't meet his gaze. All I felt was fear and regret. I knew that my affair with Adam had given me the strength to live, but at the same time, it had become the source of my destruction. Adam quietly asked, "Do you want me to leave?" I shook my head, barely holding back the tears. "I don't know what I want. Just stay," I whispered. and he hugged me, holding me close as if trying to shield me from the world. But I knew that no embrace could protect me from what lay ahead. I had to make a choice. I had to be honest. And I knew that the time had come. The time for lies was over. The return home was hard. I sat on the plane next to Sarah, and inside me, a storm of emotions raged. What happened on the beach had become a moment of truth for me. Despite the shock and pain, Sarah supported me, but she also insisted that I needed to be honest with Logan, and I knew she was right. I had to end my relationship with Adam and tell my husband the truth. But how could I do that? How could I destroy his life, confess to betrayal, knowing it could ruin everything? Adam understood that our story had to end too. When we said goodbye at our last meeting, I saw the same pain reflected in his eyes as in mine. He had become someone important to me, but it was just an escape, a way to avoid what I didn't want to face in my life. I knew it was wrong. I knew I had to return to my reality, to Logan, to the life we had built together. But how do you step back when you've gone so far? I entered the house late in the evening. Logan was in the kitchen, making tea, looking tired after work. When he saw me, his face lit up with a smile, and it caused me unbearable pain. He still loved me, still trusted me. I felt a lump form in my throat, and I had to take several deep breaths to stop myself from crying right at the door. "Hey, honey," he said, walking over to hug me. His embrace was so warm and familiar, and I felt my heart tighten with pain. "How was the trip? You look tired." I couldn't answer right away. Instead, I just stood there, leaning against him, trying to find the strength for what I was about to say. Logan pulled back, looking at me, his eyes full of concern. "Rachel, is something wrong?" His voice was soft, but I knew I couldn't stall any longer. "We need to talk, Logan," I whispered, and he frowned, releasing me. We sat at the kitchen table, and I began to speak. The words came slowly, each one cutting me from the inside. I told him everything, about Adam, about our meetings, about how lost I felt, and how I was searching for a way out. I saw his face gradually lose its expression, his eyes darken, and a bitter smile form on his lips. "Are you joking, Rachel?" His voice was quiet, but I could hear the rising anger. "Do you really think I deserve this? That I deserve for my wife to cheat on me?" "No, Logan, you don't deserve this," I replied, holding back tears. "I know I've done something terrible, but I want you to know the truth. I can't live a lie anymore." He slammed his fist on the table, his face contorted with pain and anger. "Why, Rachel? Why did you do it? I've always tried for us. I loved you. I supported you. Why?" I didn't know how to respond. How could I explain that I had just lost myself, that I couldn't live in the routine anymore, that I was searching for something to make me feel alive again? It all sounded like an excuse, and I knew that no words could soften what I had done. "I was confused, Logan. I lost myself," I said, feeling tears run down my cheeks. "It's not your fault. You did everything you could. It's me who broke. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth." He stood up, his eyes full of anger and disappointment. "You want me to know the truth? Fine. Now I know. But what do you expect, Rachel? That I'll tell you it's okay? That I'll forgive you, and we'll just move on as if nothing happened?" His words hurt, but I understood that he had every right to say them. He walked to the door, opened it, and looked at me. "Leave. I need time to think. I can't see you right now." I knew this moment would come, but when it actually happened, it was unbearable. I stepped outside, and the door slammed shut behind me, leaving me in the darkness of the night. I stood on the street, feeling the cold air hit my face, and realized that everything I knew, everything I loved, was now destroyed. The next few days passed in a blur. I stayed at Sarah's, who, despite all the pain, still supported me. She didn't say much. She was just there. And that was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. I tried to reach out to Logan, but he didn't answer my calls. I knew I had to give him time, but the waiting was unbearable. A week later, I received a notice from a lawyer. Logan had filed for divorce. It was the moment of complete devastation. I read through the papers, feeling as if each line, each word, tore me apart. This was what I had feared the most, and now it had become a reality. Logan had decided to end everything, and I had no right to blame him for it. I tried to talk to him, tried to arrange a meeting, but he refused. His lawyer conveyed that he didn't want to see me anymore, and that was the essence of it. My betrayal had destroyed his trust, his love, our family, and now I was left alone. Returning to my place, I realized that my life now had to begin a new chapter. Without Logan, without Adam, without all the illusions I had built around myself. It was painful, but perhaps through this pain, I would finally be able to find myself. I had lost everything I loved, but maybe that was necessary to start over. I looked in the mirror and saw my reflection. A woman with a tired, broken look, but still alive. Still ready to fight, despite everything that had happened. And maybe that was the beginning of my new life. I couldn't just give up. Despite all the mistakes, all the pain, I couldn't let go of Logan without one last attempt. I needed to see him one more time, to ask for forgiveness, to explain everything that had remained hidden for so long. I knew the chances were slim, that he probably would never forgive me, but I had to try. This might be the last chance to somehow fix my life. I drove to our house, the home we built together, filled with our memories, laughter, dreams. My heart clenched as I stopped in front of the door, seeing the familiar windows, the familiar door. I took a nervous breath, gathering all my courage, and rang the bell. The silence stretched for a few moments, and then the door opened. Logan stood before me, his face grim and tired, as if each passing day had added several years to him. "What do you want, Rachel?" His voice was cold, just like his gaze. He looked at me as if through me, and I felt my knees start to tremble. "Logan, please, I need to talk to you," I whispered, feeling the tears beginning to well up in my eyes. I know I made a terrible mistake, and I understand that I don't deserve forgiveness, but I have to try. He sighed, and something like weary acceptance appeared in his eyes. He stepped aside, letting me in. We sat in the living room, the same room where we had spent so many happy evenings. But now there was a chasm between us, so deep that I didn't know how to bridge it. "Talk," he said briefly, not looking at me, staring at the floor. I struggled to piece together my thoughts. Everything I wanted to say seemed meaningless and weak in the face of what I had done. "Logan, I know I've destroyed everything we had. I know I hurt you, and that you'll never be able to forgive me. But I love you. I've always loved you. What happened was my weakness, my fear, my escape. I'm not excusing myself. I just want you to know how much I regret all of this." The words flowed out, and with each one, I felt like my soul was being laid bare before him, exposing all my weakness and vulnerability. He was silent for a long time, the silence filling the room like a thick fog. Then Logan lifted his eyes, and in them was so much pain that I could barely stand it. "You say you love me, Rachel, but how can you love someone and betray them like that at the same time?" His voice trembled, but there was no anger, only deep disappointment and exhaustion. "I trusted you, I believed in us, and all you did was destroy everything we built. You say you want forgiveness, but I can't give it. I don't see the woman I once loved in you anymore." Those words tore me apart, each phrase like a dagger to the heart. I knew I had no right to ask for his forgiveness, but hearing it was unbearable. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I covered my face with my hands, feeling everything crumble around me. "Logan, please. I just want you to know that I've changed. I realized how deeply I was wrong. I'm willing to do anything to fix this, to bring back even a small part of what we had." I could barely speak, my voice breaking with sobs. Logan shook his head, his eyes filled with sadness. I don't want to live in the past anymore, Rachel. I can't live with a woman who betrayed me. You need to understand that. We're done. You destroyed it, and there's no going back. Goodbye. He stood up, pointing to the door, and I knew this was the end. The real, final end. There was no more us. No shared future. I stood, trembling, and walked to the door, feeling like each step was tearing my soul apart. As I stepped outside, the door shut behind me, and this time, I knew it would never open for me again. I was left standing on the doorstep of our home, feeling the cold wind pierce through me. My life, my family, everything I loved, was now lost because of my own choices, my own mistakes. I drove to Sarah's. She met me at the door, and seeing my face, she didn't ask any questions. She simply hugged me, and I broke down in her arms, sobbing like a child who had lost everything. There was warmth in her embrace, but it couldn't fill the emptiness that had now opened inside me. I was alone, and that was the scariest reality I had to face. I had destroyed my family, and there was no way back. Logan was right. He couldn't forgive me, and I understood that. I had shattered his trust, his love, and for that, there could be no forgiveness. The nights were the hardest. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence, which felt unbearable. I replayed all the moments we had shared, all the happiness, all the dreams we had built together. And now, all of it was gone. Just emptiness and the bitterness of knowing that I had destroyed my own life. Every morning, I forced myself to get up, to keep living, to look for work, to try and regain at least a part of my independence. Sarah was there, but I knew that no one could fill the hole that had opened inside me. I was lost, but this time, there was no Adam to save me, no Logan to support me. It was just me and my mistakes. One day, looking in the mirror, I realized that I had to start living again. Yes, I had lost everything I loved, but now, the only way forward was to try and find myself in this new reality. Without Logan, without Adam, without all the illusions I had built, I had to learn to forgive myself, even if Logan couldn't. And perhaps that was the hardest challenge of all. I was alone, but maybe, in that solitude, in this new beginning, I could find my way back to something real, something that wasn't built on lies and fear. I knew it would be a long road, full of pain and disappointment, but maybe, just maybe, that was the only way I could start the next chapter of my life.